And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB. ABSA is a registered FSP. 9 minutes after 6. Good evening. Welcome to the program. I'm Stephen Grootes. I made a comment earlier today to 702's John Perlman that I suspect by the end of the week, even before Saturday starts, we're probably going to be tired of the number 20. And the number 20 has done nothing to me. It's done nothing to you. We're still going to be tired of it because we're going to hear so much of it. On the other hand, I do get a sense of anticipation as well. The B20, then the G20. There'll be a few other 20s between here now and then, I suspect. But it's kind of great to have everybody coming here. Lots of conversations, lots of interesting things to talk about. And a reminder perhaps that South Africa is still a player, still matters. And that for the moment, our story seems to be going in the right direction after the ratings upgrade by S&P Global late on Friday night. It was kind of 50-50 as to whether it would happen. And I remember so clearly hearing the analysis that if it wasn't going to happen on Friday, it would certainly happen early next year. Plenty of questions about what happens next, including what we need to do to ensure that we do get another upgrade and at least two more from here and back into the kind of investment grade. And I remember sort of, so clearly the events that led to us being downgraded and downgraded again, and what happened with Pravin Gordhan being fired, and when was it, April Fool's Day, Malusi Gigaba being appointed finance minister. And I remember even more clearly where it kind of all started, which I suppose was the firing of Nhlanhla Nene, really, if you think about it. Anyway, thinking about all of that, we will talk a bit more about the upgrades. Anisha Pakrasamy and Kevin Lings on your radio in about 5 minutes. Before that, the Astral CEO Gary Arnold talking about their results. They made more chicken. They produced more chicken, I should say, but also, of course, still very difficult to run a chicken business in South Africa. WeBuyCars, you may remember we spoke to Faan van der Walt a couple of weeks ago. Their share price had just tanked. They had put out an outlook warning about how it was that it seemed demand for second-hand cars was slowing, partly because there are so many cheaper Chinese new cars entering the market. They had their full results out today. Also before 7 o'clock, Jan Vermeulen from My Broadband, the sort of latest battle around the Please Call Me Money. One of the strange stories about this is that a British investor called Errol Elston claims that Mokata owes him 40% of the money that he got. But Elston doesn't know how much it was. Do you remember Shamil Yusuf last week wouldn't tell us how much it was? I mean, it's such a strange story. Good to hear from you tonight. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567. And your voice notes, please. The one thing you would do now, if you were in government or had any influence to ensure that we got another ratings upgrade, where would you start? What would be the most important thing you would do? 072 702 1702. 12 minutes after 6.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app
and DSTV channel 856.
The poultry producer Astral able to report strong results today. Operating profits up by nearly 11%. It's produced more chicken. That means they're able to bring down production costs. The group is warning, though, that South Africa's economic outlook's likely to be constrained and that bird flu may no longer be a seasonal disease. The CEO at Astral is Gary Arnold. Gary, good evening. You were able to produce quite a bit more chicken. How were you able to do that?
Yeah, good evening, Stephen, and to your listeners. Stephen, we were fortunate, on the back of our expansion in production or capacity that we commissioned in 2020, we had spare capacity in our operations. And, we were able to bring it on stream fairly quickly with a lead time of about 2 months. So that decision was made early in the year. The past festive period, we sold a lot of product out of stock, so we had well manageable stock levels and brought more volumes to production in line with really a well-balanced market in terms of supply and demand.
In other words, you're able to manage the stock that you had more effectively, and that saved you a bit of money. And I presume the more you produce, the more it brings down your cost per unit, your production cost.
Absolutely, Stephen. I mean, one needs to keep a close eye on the stock. Produce chicken and end up putting it, so one wants to sell it. And of course, those volumes through the same, overhead costs, fixed cost structure. At the end of the day, our per unit per kilogram production cost came down. It benefited from the higher volumes, and we were able to produce chicken at a more affordable price.
For many companies, load shedding is over, and that's really helped them. Your problems have often been around the Lekwa municipality. If I remember, you had to invest in your own systems. Is that still a difficult problem? I mean, does that have an impact on you, even though load shedding is over?
Yeah, it does, Stephen. Unfortunately, we know national load shedding is no longer an issue, but within the municipalities themselves, we still battle from time to time with the electricity supply on infrastructure that, is just, we haven't seen upkeep for many years. Water supply disruptions, so we, end up carting water to the factories, or as in the case that we had last week with Lekwa municipality, not able to deliver clean potable water through the municipal supply system, which actually disrupted our processing capacity or volumes in Standerton last week. So we do suffer from those from time to time. And on average, a 10 million rand a month bill for diesel and to cart water around. So certainly not an ideal environment. That's 120 million rand a year and unnecessary costs for services that one should otherwise be provided by the municipality.
Sure. I mean, the difference to your bottom line would be huge. Your concern about bird flu, and you say there's slow progress on vaccination. Should that be moving more quickly? Where's the hold-up in that? Is it with you or is it with government?
Well, Stephen, they published guidelines for a vaccination strategy in November 2023, and we made applications against those guidelines to vaccinate one farm, which represents about 5% of our total breeding stock, broiler breeding stock in the group. And we received approval to vaccinate that farm a few months ago. Now, that was 18 months after our initial application. So that was a very slow process, and we had to jump through the various hurdles in order to vaccinate, our breeding parent stock. Why we say there's slow progress is that, subsequent to us receiving that initial approval, we felt that the blueprint was in place and we had, complied with the various provisions of the guidelines as published by the Department of Agriculture. And it's now a good few months later. And in fact, we made the comment in our results as we were preparing for this week. But some good news was that late on Friday afternoon, we received permission to vaccinate a further 2 farms within our operations. So when we decide to do that, we will be able to vaccinate approximately a quarter of all our breeding stock. Which with the absence of compensation around bird flu, where you have to cull your livestock as a disease control measure, and in the absence of insurance, certainly vaccination makes up an important part of that toolkit to fight and combat the disease with all the other biosecurity protocols.
No, sure. I mean, clearly there seems to be an issue there. You say that bird flu may have changed, that it's not necessarily a seasonal disease anymore. Do you mean that it could happen more often?
Well, typically, we've seen classified as a winter disease, in colder conditions. But what we're seeing around the world now, Stephen, particularly with H5N1, is that it's prevalent through the seasons. So the US and Europe are seeing it both winter, summer. They're having to cull birds that are infected with the disease in both winter and summer. And in South Africa, we've seen sporadic outbreaks of H5N1 now through our past winter season. But unfortunately, even in the last week, there was a reported case in KwaZulu-Natal with high summer temperatures at the moment. So certainly, by no means just a winter disease anymore. And that's why we caution, we have to keep our guard up throughout the year. We're going to have to manage this as an ever-present threat, and certainly not just, consider it during winter. I think it's something that requires vigilance throughout the year now.
Sure. I mean, that would be a big change. We're expecting a bumper maize harvest. That would keep your feed prices lower, probably. That have a big impact going forward, do you think?
Certainly. I think that benefited feed prices in the second half of the year we're reporting on. We had we had positioned ourselves well in the market, even through that volatile maize, Safex maize market that one saw through the past year. And going forward, Safex maize prices have dropped off considerably in the past couple of months. It's given us an opportunity to position ourselves and certainly benefit feed prices going forward, or at least support a maize price or feed price, which we can produce chicken at, Stephen.
Gary Arnold, the CEO at Astral, thank you very much indeed for your time on The Money Show.
702. Stephen is on X.
At Stephen Grootes.
19 after 6. Well, confirmation, of course, late on Friday night about the ratings upgrade from S&P Global. Our first ratings upgrade in over 20 years. Government making progress in paring down debt. Obviously, big progress in dealing with load shedding and logistics. Kevin Lings is the chief economist at Stanlib Asset Management. Kevin, good evening. Finally, some things are going right.
Hi, Stephen. Yeah, it was good news. Obviously, we're still well below investment grade, but the direction of travel is important. And so to get the actual acknowledgement of an upgrade, I think is good. And I would argue probably more important than that, they kept us on a positive outlook. In other words, what they're saying is if we continue on the current path, then we would expect another upgrade, let's say, within the next 12, 18 months. And so that, I think, is a very good endorsement of the progress we're making so far.
What do we do next? We obviously need to keep this momentum going, and we can't sort of rest on our laurels or anything. We need to keep going with some urgency.
Yeah, so I think we've got to look at, what got us here, and essentially that is fiscal discipline, fiscal consolidation. The National Treasury made it clear some time ago that was the intention, and they've made very measurable progress. Obviously, the debt level remains high. The interest cost of that debt remains high, but underneath it, there are meaningful improvements. We're running what's called a primary budget surplus. I won't go into the technicalities around that, but that's an important measure that the rating agencies look at. We've been able to control the increase in government employment and government salary costs. And so I think that a lot of that is now reflected in the medium-term budget. We've also got good tax collection, I think. The Revenue Service is doing a good job. We're looking at, the minister said, 19.7 billion revenue overrun. That was fairly broad. So you would say that's good. And the expenditure has been kept under control. So there's no doubt there's fiscal discipline emerging. What's lacking, unfortunately, is still the growth rate. We're still looking at just over 1%. It's not enough. And S&P highlighted, they said, look, if we're not able to continue on these reforms, then we'll lose the positive outlook. And a part of that is we've got to get the growth rate higher. And higher doesn't mean going from 1.1 to 1.5. It's got to be a measurable improvement that starts to create jobs. So if we want to kind of be assured of getting back to an investment grade credit rating, then maintain fiscal discipline in the sense that we currently do in that, and get the growth rate up to 3%. And then we should be at investment grade. So it's all about economic growth going forward.
The other thing, of course, I mean, this is the conversation we've been talking about forever, how to get South Africa's economy growing. It does somehow, and I mean, maybe this is just my optimism, maybe I'm so high on the G20 I can't think, but I do get a sense that things are turning slightly. I mean, very slightly, but there are now quite a few things going in the right direction. I mean, real sense of change at Transnet and obviously Eskom.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that there's very measurable improvements. And obviously we've been talking about the so-called reform or policy reform. But if you say, what do you mean? It's really private-public partnerships. And no doubt the energy sector led that because of the crisis with energy. That was the catalyst to get the private sector involved. And the private sector has built over 16,000 megawatts of renewable energy, which is a phenomenal commitment to South Africa. And then we've seen Barbara Creecy at Minister of Transport get the private sector involved in rail operation and private sector involved in ports. So that is tangible, and I think we're going to see more evidence of that. And there are a lot of projects in the background that have been looked at on how do we get private sector more involved in infrastructure delivery. And if I look at the medium-term budget, and if you go through the speech on the document, while government references private-public partnerships an awful amount within that document. And so it's now become part of their mainstream policy agenda, and that wasn't around a few years ago.
Indeed.
So that's the sort of progress. Obviously, what you want to do is take that and turn it into real growth. We're not at that point yet, but that would be the next step.
Kevin Lings, thank you so much. Chief Economist at Stanlib Asset Management. Sanisha Pakarasamy is the Chief Economist at Momentum Investments. Sanisha, good evening to you. Obviously, there are still one or two risks to what seems to be a sense of momentum. Some of it may be political risk. I mean, if the coalition fell apart, I imagine that might put some of the progress we've made and the prospects of further upgrades in a difficult spot.
Thank you so much, Stephen. So I think, that the sore point for South Africa right now is that we still have a very low level of fixed investment by the private sector. And as you rightly point out, it's quite low in South Africa relative to a global comparison because of that lingering policy and political uncertainty, which of course can be reinvigorated if there are further complications with the government of national unity. And I think that continues to hold back South Africa's rate of economic growth.
The other ratings agencies, they'll have been watching us as well. Do you think they'll follow S&P Global at some point? Or are we still a little bit away? Do we need to do a bit more hard work before we really start to see the sort of benefits of what we've already done?
I think from the fiscal stance, we've seen quite a bit of prudence being exercised. In the last budget that was announced in the medium-term budget policy statement, it was very encouraging that government decided to use that revenue overrun in a more prudent way. And we've seen in the past that it's not often where we use a revenue overrun in a most prudent way to still reinvigorate growth in South Africa. That's from the one standpoint. I think we also need to continue to see that the structural reform momentum continues to gain progress. We've seen a fair amount of it coming through in the energy sector, but then we do need to see this being pulled through for the logistics sector, which continues to be a drag on growth, as well as in the water sector.
Where's the next sort of priority for government? I mean, Eskom, okay, tick, sort of. Transnet, kind of tick. Where do we go next? Obviously, the debt, which we're working on, I would imagine if I were a ratings agency, I'd want to see real proof that we can actually reduce parts of perhaps government's wage bill, things like that.
Fiscally, I think they will be looking to South Africa to contain the amount of money that we dish out to state-owned entities. And so to start to see an improvement on the financial and the governance metrics there, as well as on the municipality side. So we know that Operation Vulindlela, which is a project office between Treasury and the Presidency, in their second term are focusing on overhauling municipalities. I think that will be a key focal point. And then in order to maintain those expenditures so that we can see things like debt servicing costs over time reduce as a share of revenue. At the moment, it's sitting at, for every 1 rand of revenue, 20 cents goes towards servicing that debt burden. But we've come from a place where debt servicing costs used to be the fastest growing expenditure item. And in the most recent results for the MTBPS, it's now the fourth highest growing item. So we are starting to see some signs of progress as our borrowing costs come down in line with a lower inflation target. But I think more concrete evidence needs to be seen on that front.
Meryl, thank you very much indeed. Sanisha Pakarasamy is the Momentum Investments Chief Economist.
The Money Show.
The Markets.
Meryl Peck is Portfolio Manager at Old Mutual Investments. Meryl, good evening. The impact of the credit rating in the banks and the retailers, they had a strong day today.
Good evening. Yes, and good evening to your listeners. Definitely seeing some positive sentiment in the SA Inc. consumer-facing, more cyclical shares today, boosted, I think, by stronger rand as a result of that ratings upgrade. And I think a lot more of a positive sentiment building for the moment towards South Africa, which we've seen in the bond yields pulling back, the rand strengthening, and some perhaps renewed interest from global investors in South Africa, as perhaps we have finally started to turn the corner. The reform green shoots that your previous speaker referred to, starting to come through in the rand. We haven't gone to a 16 handle quite yet, but I suppose we couldn't rule that out if this momentum continues.
Naspers and Prosus, obviously, they seem to be having quite a strong time as well.
Yeah, so the Prosus put out a trading statement. Obviously, the underlying asset there is the most important asset still remains Tencent in China, and we know that there's a lot of growth in the emerging AI space. China is not left out of that, and yet Tencent trades at a discount to the US tech shares. But within the rest of Prosus, you have these e-commerce businesses that have increasingly becoming more profitable, and that's we've seen that continue, and also the share buyback program continuing to bolster earnings per share.
And WeBuyCars, their share really took a hammering, their share price 2 weeks ago when they first sort of said that they were battling a little bit because of cheaper Chinese new cars. They say in their statement today they've grown more agile in dealing with that.
Yeah, look, I think it's a question of how long is your investment horizon with WeBuyCars. Perhaps in the short term, expectations were quite high. They have been growing fast. The multiple had expanded, and people the market was starting to price in a lot of that. But structurally, I would say this is a cyclical issue. Yes, Chinese cars have come in. Consumers are preferring new cars over Chinese cars, over used cars because of that, being more affordable and maybe a bit of an interest rate cut. But if you think about their business model, they sell second-hand cars. Eventually, these Chinese cars are going to come into the second-hand car market. It's perhaps pushing out or displacing some demand for second-hand cars right now. But I think you have to look at the strength of the business model and how much consolidation they can still do in the second-hand car market. I think it's a bit of a setback, and perhaps an opportunity to get into a good story at a lower price.
Meryl Peck, thanks very much indeed. Portfolio Manager at Old Mutual Investment.
WhatsApp Stephen
on 072
702
1702.
22 minutes now to 7 the time. Well, obviously, your points for what we would need to do next to get another ratings upgrade. The point is that in the end, all of this, government gets its act together, the ratings get upgraded and all of those things, it will have a big impact on your life. Something that really does seem to be having a big impact on all of our lives is the way that we make phone calls. And I'm fascinated by how quickly we seem to be going from what I'd call normal, or my children would call old, phone calls to WhatsApp calls, data calls in some way. I say that because MTN today reported that their revenue from prepaid calls was down. Their revenue from postpaid calls was up, but prepaid was down. The reason I mention it is that you may remember the conversation we had with Shamil Yousab, the CEO of Vodacom last week. There was a particular number he wouldn't share with me, but he did talk about the fact that prepaid calls were down for them. So you put the two together, something is clearly shifting. Now, either we're all getting richer and buying postpaid contracts and cell phones, which I'm afraid to say I think is unlikely, or we're finding other ways to contact people. And even though if you use WhatsApp, often if you do it through data, it can still be cheaper. There are other ways to do it. There are plenty of free Wi-Fi bits around. Go for this here or walk past that shop there. Know that it works and hang around for a slightly long time. I'm sure if you walk through a shopping center, there are plenty of ways to get free Wi-Fi, or of course in many minibus taxis as well now, you would be able to do that. And I'm sure that's what people are doing. But it seems to be changing very quickly. I've made this point to you before. I still prefer a kind of normal call because you know where you are with the bits of silence. It's when you have that delay. I feel you miss something there. Your thoughts, 011 883 0702 021 446 0567, and of course voice notes, yes, on 072 702 1702. We'll speak to WeBuyCars in a moment.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM, streaming on the Prime Media Plus app
and DSTV channel 856.
16 minutes to 7. Well, WeBuyCars reporting finally that it is facing pressure from cheaper new Chinese brands. As a result, it is facing a little bit of pressure on prices. The group reporting today, it's selling about 15,000 vehicles a month. Its core headline earnings per share up 3.3% in the year to the end of September. Faan van der Walt is the founder and executive director at WeBuyCars. Faan, good evening to you. Obviously, we remember you spoke to us. You were very open with us, and you first gave us an indication about how the industry was changing. We heard from you 2 weeks ago. How are you responding to what does look like quite a challenge for you from Chinese vehicles?
Stephen, yes, good evening, and thank you for having me. The market is certainly dynamic. Over the many years we've been trading, we've seen periods where there's accelerated depreciation in vehicles, and the opposite when supply and demand ebbs and flows from time to time. Now, what's happened in this year is the Chinese onslaught on not only the new vehicle industry, but it also impacts the used car industry, and used vehicle dealers are not immune to that because we and they are sitting with stock second-hand vehicles that competes directly in the same price ranges as new vehicles can sell for. And it's quite evident when you look at how many new models you can buy for between 400,000 Rand and up. So there's definitely been a shift in the market. Some of the legacy brands are struggling to compete with the offering, and there are so many entrants into the market, it's difficult to name them all and to even pronounce their names. So some of the questions people have is, will these brands last? Which one should I buy if I consider buying such a car? But it certainly had an impact on the market, and we have responded by adjusting our pricing models so that we adjust for this accelerated deflation, and we have a healthy stock mix.
So you're making a lot less money on each sale?
Well, we already took the pain. That's why our second half wasn't as great as the first half. We have a very quick inventory turnover of maximum about 30 days. So the moment we saw that, and it's only a small portion of our stock holding that did overlap in that price segment, because we serve the whole market. There's about 12 million cars in South Africa with an average age of sitting around 9 to 10 years. And that's typically what we buy. So it only influences the upper end, where you would compete with a new vehicle's price range. So a good example would be you would have a VW Tiguan in stock. It's a 2-year-old car, brand new. It was 650. You're now selling at 500. But there's not a lot of interest because people are veering the other way because there's such a compelling offering. And then you have to start selling these cars at a lower margin or even at cost. And that's what we've done for a period, and that's why the margin became under pressure.
So on one level, this is about demand. This is about the number of people buying cars from you. Is it having an impact on the number of people selling cars to you? And does that mean then that you have a lot more cars on your books for longer than you would like, and that adds to the cost because you've got to look after them for longer?
Well, it depends. Our average turn did not go up because we adjusted prices in time. If we left the prices where they were, that would certainly have impacted our inventory turn, but we didn't have the luxury because we started running out of space earlier this year. We have space for around 12,000 cars, and that's it. And our next facilities are only coming online within the next month, when we'll add more than 3,000 bays to the inventory. So, if that happened sooner, we would probably have had a better second half. But if you have only so much space, then you have to, put a few tricks to get rid of the stock and move on. So there were good buys to be had, and but the positive side is, we have recalibrated. We enter the new financial year with a healthy stock mix, well balanced, and ready to rock and roll.
You said you described trading conditions during the winter period as challenging, but you learned lessons during that period. So is there anything else you can really change? I mean, you just have to take the pain for the moment, wait for the change to happen, and get on with it?
Yeah, look, this is certainly not the first time we've seen a change in market conditions. A good example of recent years was during COVID, when new vehicle supply was under a lot of pressure. There weren't any new vehicles for sale for quite a while, and then there was actually appreciation in used car values, and consumers suddenly found themselves in a position of equity within their vehicles, and they could trade much easier, much sooner. And then a year later, the opposite happened, and you had accelerated deceleration. So there are periods where you have a bit of a tailwind and a bit of a headwind. It's never plain sailing as it is. But with the new entrants into the market, again, it's always been like that. We've always had new entrants in the market, making a compelling case, being very competitive. So you have to adjust to these circumstances. The fact is the car pool is growing. The number of vehicles on the roads are growing, so there's more opportunity to dealing. So with that in mind, our sole focus is to serve customers better and better all the time. That's why we are rolling out more branches, and we want to make it as easy as possible for a consumer to transact with us.
Faan van der Walt, thanks very much indeed. Founder and Executive Director at WeBuyCars. So many things are clearly changing in the car market. The anecdotal evidence certainly backs up what Faan van der Walt has been saying there about this issue around Chinese cars. There is a lot going on in all of this, and I certainly get a sense that a lot more things are going to change. I suppose, though, I don't know if it automatically follows that there'll be a lot more stock for WeBuyCars to sell. I mean, maybe if the average age of cars on the roads now is 10 years, do we know for sure that it'll stay like that? I don't know if we do. 072-702-1702, 8 minutes to 7.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa CIB. Absa is a registered FSP.
7 minutes now to 7. The time, well, just as Nkosana Makate should finally be getting his money from Vodacom after the Please Call Me case. In a strange twist, and there's sort of so many twists in this, a British investor has told his lawyer to hold back the payout. He believes he's owed 40% of the payout. Errol Elsden will be in court tomorrow to ask a judge to force Makate to pay him some of the money. He says his company at the time, BlackRock Mining, financed part of Makate's action. Jan Vermeulen is at mybroadband.co.za. Jan, good evening. This is such a strange story. Makate says he cancelled this agreement with BlackRock Mining. Elsden claims he cancelled the agreement with the wrong company. I mean, by any standard, this is putting bizarre upon absurd.
Yeah, good evening. Unfortunately, this is entirely predictable because we knew that this dispute existed since 2016, and when a settlement was reached and the amounts that were being calculated started coming out, we knew that these guys would come out of the woodwork. So yeah, unfortunately, and it looks like the latest development is that tomorrow's hearing is now not going to happen. And that because Makate and his team have agreed that they would hold 40% of his settlement in his lawyer's trust account, and then the full interdict will be heard sometime in the first week of December, from the 2nd of December, and then based on that, either the payment will be released or it will be interdicted until the merits of BlackRock's case is heard.
I mean, we don't know what the final payout from Vodacom was. Jamil Yusuf refused to tell me and everybody else who asked him last week. Elston doesn't know how much it is either. I mean, maybe that's all he wants, is he wanted to know how much it was.
Maybe. No, he definitely wants 40% of it. But I mean, based on because Vodacom released 2 trading updates.
Yeah, sure.
And so based on the difference between those 2 trading updates, the estimated impact on its earnings, we could calculate pretty reliably that it was an amount somewhere between 380 million and 730 odd million. And pretty reliable sources told me it's over 500 million. So we know it's over 500 million at least. And so that, 40% of that is a substantial chunk of change, and definitely something is going to fight something someone is going to fight for. Also want to just point out when I say hear the merits of the case, I mean BlackRock has today, I spoke to their legal advice or their legal counsel today, and he says that simultaneously with reaching this agreement with Makate's team, they have referred the matter to arbitration. And they've suggested a date somewhere in mid-December for that to be heard.
There are so many firsts in South African law, and because we use precedent, that makes it much harder to make any kind of judgment on what will happen next, because this is an agreement by someone to finance someone else's legal fight. I mean, I don't think that had happened here before either. In other words, all of this is actually quite difficult to know how it's going to end. Never mind the idea of cancelling, on their version, cancelling a contract with the wrong company.
Right, and when you wade into the weeds of the court papers, it starts getting quite murky because firstly, a lot of this hinges on a arbitration that happened in 2020, where a advocate had ruled that there's two companies involved here. The one is Raining Men Trade, and the other one is BlackRock Mining. And for the longest time, we were all focused on Raining Men Trade. But this arbitration ruling that came out in 2020 said that, no, Raining Men Trade had no claim on Makate, and BlackRock Mining was the only valid claim on Makate's settlement. But BlackRock, it's registered in the British Virgin Islands, was deregistered at the time. And now the chicanery and shenanigans that have emerged here now is BlackRock has been re-registered. And on Alston's account, that under British Virgin Island law means that it's retroactive. It's like the deregistration never happened. And so, like, all its claims and stuff are still in effect. So, yeah, all of that stuff has to be evaluated. There's a lot of Makate saying, aside from the initial amount that you paid back in, 2011 or whatever it was, you've basically contributed nothing. And Alston saying that's not true. We've given substantial sums of money, including £100,000 to your lawyer. There's a whole lot of claims and counterclaims that have to be evaluated now.
All of this for something of which I've been reminded constantly in the last 2 weeks, for which Nkosana Makate does not hold the patent. Somebody else does, who was at MTN at the time. I'm not denying that Makate had the idea. Clearly he did. He just wasn't the only one to have it at roughly that time. I mean, I just think the books that people are going to write about this are going to tell us so much about humanity.
Yeah, and look, something to keep in mind here, when you start getting into South Africa's legal system, it's not necessarily about right, wrong, or truth at all. And in this particular case, I think it's important to remember that it's not about who invented Please Call Me. And Ari Khan is deeply aggrieved by this whole thing. He's the guy who was at MTN at the time and who had the patent done while he was an MTN employee. MTN, on his account, actually didn't renew the patent in around 2007.
Wow.
And so that's also part of the thing here. But be that as it may, the issue at play here is whether there was a agreement in place between Vodacom and Makate for compensation for his idea and nothing else. And so, all things aside, he certainly got a lot more out of this than anybody else would for just an idea. But that is a factor of the amount of time at play here, and so the amount of time that we got dragged through the South African courts, and so that kind of gets taken into account in this whole thing as well.
Jan Vermeulen, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. From mybroadband.co.za. In a moment, Why We Need New Leaders. That's a book, not a statement. It's 7 o'clock.
And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
7 minutes after 7. Plenty to come in the next little while. We'll get a little bit into the B20 and the G20 and the possibility of unlocking some growth around Africa's internal trade and through micro, small and medium enterprises, looking at that issue as well. There's so much to look at there. Some of the numbers that come out of it are really quite surprising. And then the book, the book is called We Need New Leaders. It's by Charlotte Otter. I'm looking around to see if anyone disagrees with the title of the book. I don't know if there's anyone where you are who disagrees with the title of the book, We Need New Leaders. It is about corporate leadership. Yeah, again. Anyway, we'll talk about that in the next little while. And then looking forward to our conversation with Renee LaRue, founder of the Almond Girl, finds herself as an almond farmer. It's all about nuts, and very interesting background to the farm as well. A few generations to the farm, and she did not really see herself growing nuts for a living, but in the way of so many people with successful careers, here we are. There she is, growing, selling, buying nuts. 9 minutes after 7.
WhatsApp Stephen
On 072
702
1702.
We've been talking about cars this evening, and of course Chinese cars coming into the market. Voice notes on 072 702 1702.
Stephen John here from Randburg. I really believe that the Chinese vehicles still have to earn our trust. Their infinite warranty, for instance, is only valid for the first owner in some cases. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of fine print we have to get through or just suffer through, because I've heard a few horror stories out there.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing. I mean, you can't say all the cars from one country are good or bad. I mean, it can't be done like that. There was also a time when the first Japanese cars came out and people didn't really like them, and suddenly they improved. And by the way, if you want to look at an industry that had and a country that had really bad cars, look at Britain in the 1970s. They did not have great cars. Some of them really were not up to scratch. I mean, people tell stories of Jaguars of the time and some of the others that were really not great compared to what was coming out of, say, Germany. Again, you can't really go by country. You need to go by company. And obviously, we'll see what's happening. I do think, though, to me it seems, I don't see how you change it. And you'll have heard people who know a lot more about it than I do talking about this on the Money Show in the last few months. But it seems that China's manufacturing, when it comes to cars, is just going to take over. And that's really going to be the issue. Remember the story about the CEO at Porsche saying he did not think they'll be able to make cars for a profit in Germany anymore.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
and DSTV channel 856.
Well, a new report out before the B20 and then the G20 about inclusive trade for micro, small and medium enterprises, women and youth. It suggests that while these firms employ around 70% of the people in Africa who work, they're only contributing 15% to Africa's exports. It's an astonishing number. Bohani Hlongwane is the Absa CIB Interim Managing Executive for Transactional Banking. Bohani, good evening. I mean, there's a huge disparity here to have so many people working in these firms, producing such a small amount of our exports. What's holding them back? Are there particular problems?
Good evening to your listeners, Stephen. You're right. I think this is a huge disparity. In addition to that, Africa itself accounts for 17% of global population, as we said on the report, but only 3% of global GDP and global trade. And so naturally, there are questions as to why is this the case? And there are a number of things that this report unearthed in terms of what are the causes of these very low levels of trade across the board, but also intra-Africa trade. A number of these things relate to market access and just lack of market information and accessibility in terms of people that are actually engaged in business and creating goods and services. But there are also issues around capacity and market readiness. And there's also a big issue. There's always been a big issue about access to trade finance. Trade finance gap, in particular in Africa, is anything, between $100 billion to $120 billion. And most of it affects the micro, small and medium enterprises. And that's because of a whole range of things that we actually talk to in the report itself. And then, of course, which is a big barrier in terms of trade, it's high trade costs. So not just trade costs in terms of tariffs, that's an issue, but non-tariff barriers are a big driver of non-participation in terms of trade, because if it takes you a lot more than you expect to move goods across borders, across countries in the continent, you're probably much more likely to try and look only for markets from within the country that you are in. Or alternatively, as we see, is you're finding it easier to deal with developed countries. And I think lastly, on the question of infrastructure, which is always a key one, I think the much more relevant one now is about digital infrastructure, access to information in terms of, the fiber, bandwidth, all of the stuff around how do we create access. All of these things combined make it very difficult for trade to happen, driven by this segment of business, the MSMEs.
I mean, a lot of it is structural. And I mean, it's the classic case. We have it in South Africa too. If you're inside the economy, if you're one of the big Santon corporates, you're fine. If you're outside of those circles, well, life is very tough. And this is about our societies. It's about governance. It's about all sorts of things. But there's a lot of structural stuff here that'll have to change, and that doesn't happen overnight.
Absolutely. And I think, look, granted, we've made a lot of progress. I think we are making progress. If you look at the AfCFTA, for example, I know that, we still have very little trade that is happening within the AfCFTA, but the protocol has been agreed. Issues of rules of origin have been agreed. Qualifying goods and services are also agreed. And then we've had a few experiments that are called guided tours in terms of trying to check now that, the tariffs are not there for particular goods or for a lot of these goods. Can we move the goods from point A to point B? So can we move coffee from Uganda across to Kenya, or move cocoa from Ghana or Cote d'Ivoire across to South Africa without issues? And these guided tours themselves have unearthed a number of challenges where these routes that we're talking about are actually not that established. So the key focus on non-tariff barriers, it's quite important. And I think with respect to the recommendations that we talk about, some of those talk about how do we pull together a number of resources, all the parties in this ecosystem that are involved in trading, to make sure that they are quite accessible and that businesses that are in these spaces actually know where to go, and they can get support in terms of capacity building. They can get support in terms of, how you actually go about accessing financing. So, these are structural, but the structural things requires the kinds of recommendations that we've made in the report, together with the Task Force on Trade and Investment, with the B20 Task Force on Trade and Investment. These kinds of recommendations that we've made are actually structural recommendations.
Sure.
Importantly, though, we've also put in there ways for us to be able to track and monitor progress, so that it's not just a report that sits there and gathers dust, but it's something that we can always come back to and say, how far have we gone in terms of that recommendation?
So Bohani, whenever I see leaders from our continent talking about the African Continental Free Trade Area, they all talk about it as if it's a good thing, right? And each one also has domestic considerations where for some people in that society, it's not a good thing to not have tariffs. It's not a good thing to, be the only cocoa producer in one country and have Ugandan or cocoa from Cote d'Ivoire coming in. And isn't that the problem? It's a political problem. Now, look, I mean, the same thing happens in other places, in other continents. But that is the dynamic, and we have to accept that, yes, the leaders may say they want it, but their domestic constituencies don't always want it.
Stephen, I think it's multi-layered. I think the points you're you're raising are very valid, but it's a multi-layered problem. What it does require, and this goes to some of the recommendations that we make. For example, the first recommendation that we talk about is expanding and diversifying access to trade finance. And in particular, we talk about, blended financing solutions and solutions that involve banks like us as ABSA and many other commercial banks, but equally development finance institutions, which have a different agenda in terms of what they're supposed to drive. So whether you're talking about the AFDB, the IFCs and the BRIs and many others, as well as multiple government agencies and chambers of commerce across the board. I think we do need to wake up to the reality that we need to get to a point where the reality of this $1.something trillion market is accessible to business people across the board. Sure, it does involve giving in here and there, but I think for the benefit of the growth of the African economy, it becomes critical for us to simplify how we do business in the continent, how people move and how goods and services move in the continent. And a number of these recommendations that we make are quite practical.
Sure.
Importantly, though, of course, these are part of the recommendations that we're passing through to the G20. But we also have now, bodies like the International Chamber of Commerce, which is across all countries globally, which has committed to being party to driving these recommendations. The AFCFTA Secretariat itself has, as well as the governments of the G20, I suppose, business, business community. But I think it will require a lot more of people to actually put their shoulder on the wheel and move forward.
Bahani Klangwani, thanks very much indeed. ABSA CIB, Interim Managing Executive for Transactional Banking, 19 after 7.
The Money Show.
Business books.
Well, tonight's business book is a book, We Need New Leaders by Charlotte Otter. Charlotte, good evening to you. I don't need to tell you how great the title of your book is. There's been a lot of comments about it today, but you're talking specific about how leadership is so much more public, things move so much more quickly. Leaders suddenly have a lot more to do. They have to be seen to do it. And I presume that is part of your central thesis about why we need new leaders?
Yeah, absolutely. And good evening to you, Stephen, and to your listeners. It's so much more public having a leadership role now. We can't avoid the role of social media. And, the divide between the internal and external has completely fallen away. 20 plus years ago, leaders could say one thing inside the corporation and another thing outside the corporation and get away with it. Whereas now, you turn up at a Coldplay concert and you on the kiss cam and you've lost your job the next day. So it's extremely pointy and extremely, extremely, the leaders have to be very, very aware of this.
It must also be a lot harder. I suppose, obviously there are lots of different types of business, and those businesses are different eras, those industries. But I can't help but feel that the sheer pace of things must be very different.
The pace is completely different. And, back in the day, I used to run executive comms at a big tech company, and I was constantly being pressed for this leader needs to respond on social media, this leader needs to respond to this event. And you almost have to take a step back as a leader and take a breather and say there are only certain things I'm going to respond to. Because if you respond to every single thing that shows up on social media, then you're turning into a media organization yourself. So leaders have to be very intentional about how they're showing up both internally and externally in their organizations.
Do you need to sort of pick an issue and stick with that? Do you need to have some flexibility? Do you need to, and I know some people do this, they'll deliberately sort of stay away from public comments for a while, because when they do make a comment, it makes their comment much more powerful.
Yeah, I think there is definitely power in not talking too much and then showing up when's needed. I mean, I certainly advise leaders, you've got to show up and have an opinion on, the topics within your remit in the business. So, if you're a technology leader and you're not talking about AI, then, I'd question why. But you don't have to comment every time somebody in the hype cycle has something new to say about AI. You can still be measured, you can still be careful, and you can still show up as a smart thought leader.
I like that phrase, the hype cycle. Does this mean that we need younger leaders? Now, I understand the call for younger leaders. I'm a big fan of experience myself, I must just say. I'm reminded, though, of something that someone in the slot said a few weeks ago, which is that the younger generation of today are more unlike their parents. They're more different to their parents than any other generation before them, partly because of social media and cell phones. And if you're trying to be a leader of a CEO where you've got to sort of manage younger people and older people, all of them are customers. I mean, that's really hard. That generational difference is absolutely massive.
The generational difference is massive, and we can't argue with demographics in terms of how, Gen Z is changing, how they show up at work, how they want to show up at work, how they want to lead and be led. But in my book, I interviewed 40 leaders, both emerging and established, and the commonalities weren't necessarily specific to age, but they were specific to experience. So I interviewed leaders from diverse backgrounds, diverse identities, and underrepresented minorities. And what came up was, because of their diversity, they had lived through obstacles in order to get to their leadership positions. And those obstacles meant that they showed up as leaders with empathy, and they showed up incredibly intentional about how they spoke, about what language they used, incredibly intentionally about how they led, and just with a deep self-knowledge and an incredible thoughtfulness. Now, I think that probably a lot of the Gen Z leaders are automatically like that, but it's almost as if older leaders have to learn that it's okay to show up as yourself, a little bit messy, a little bit imperfect. This sort of obsession with perfection, it's time for that to go.
I don't know. I hear you. I think that a lot of people are going to find that to get to the top, you were told you had to be certain things, and now to try and not be those things, I think it's quite hard. Do you think that we are likely to cycle through leaders more quickly? I mean, I'm not just talking about unfortunate incidents. I mean, anyone who listens to Coldplay deserves what they get. But, is it not just going to be much harder to stay at the top?
Yes, it probably is. So as we move out of this kind of command and control style of leadership that I grew up with, the people who led me, more towards a transformational, more agile style of leadership. I mean, it may be that the oldest person in the room, the most experienced person in the room, knows less than their graduate hire, and so has to cede leadership on certain topics, and I'm thinking of AI here, to that younger person who's more au fait with the topics of the moment.
I mean, it also means, though, that you are looking for newer leaders more often, and that's no way to run a business. I mean, you do want continuity, particularly when it comes to leadership roles which involve strategy, which is, I don't know, last time I checked, all of them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's not something we're saying you're changing your leadership layer on a yearly or a 6-monthly basis. But maybe what you're doing is you're recognizing leadership in different pockets of your organization, and you're saying, for the next 6 months, this particular team or this particular young leader is going to step up and run this particular project. So maybe it's just more of a flexibility and an agility around topics that are important to the business in the moment.
Charlotte, thank you. Good to talk to you. Charlotte Otter is an author, speaker, and executive communications manager. The book is called We Need New Leaders. 28 minutes after 7.
The Money Show. How I make my money.
25 minutes now to 8 the time. Well, there are lots of ways to make money through agriculture. Lots of things you can farm. Lots of ways you can do it. Lots of different parts of the country you can be in. Insofar as I can remember, I don't think I've ever spoken to someone who helps to manage a generational nut farm before, and certainly not almonds. And the person we're speaking to tonight is Rennie Leroux. Rennie lives in the Little Karoo, because that's where you'd farm almonds if you wanted to farm them. It's the first commercial almond farm that we have in the country, and it's been going for a very long time. Rennie, good evening, and thanks so much for joining us on How I Make My Money on The Money Show.
Hi, Stephen. Thanks so much for having me.
There's quite a history of the farm, and we have to start there because everyone likes a good farming story. This was about your grandfather in the Little Karoo many, many years ago.
Yeah, my grandfather initially bought the farm as a stone fruit farm, and SAD approached him and a couple of farmers in the Western Cape to see if almond farming would be viable in South Africa. And with our perfect little pocket in the Little Karoo, it did very well. And we are based about 65 kilometers from the nearest town. So an almond is also quite a nice product that you don't have to rush to the market. So, I think with my father's vision also, they could plan and build something, an industry in South Africa that was not very known at that time.
How important is the little pocket of the Little Karoo where you're in at the moment? I mean, is it really the only place in South Africa you could grow them? I mean, would any of your competitors have to farm right next door to you to make it work?
So almonds like a dry and hot summer. So the Western Cape in South Africa it's a very good location to be at, and we've pulled a lot of other farmers in the area. The Robertson Valley, the Worcester Valley, Swartland, Paul. So we are more than happy to have as many people plant almonds to get this industry really, really going in the country.
How seasonal are almonds? I mean, does the season matter? Do you get just one crop a year?
Yes, so we harvest from February up until April. And different cultivars have different harvesting times to when it starts. So the nonpareil is the most sought after nut, the most premium grade, and that's also the soft shell. So that's the first variety that starts when we have to start harvesting with that. And then so the other varieties come at a later stage. So it's a full on 4 or 5 months of solid harvesting. And then from there on, we have to hull and shell and pack and get the almonds ready for the market.
And the plant it comes from, it's a sort of bush or a tree?
No, so almonds it's essentially, it's from the stone fruit family. So it looks like a peach or apricot tree. So it's a tree. And we have different rootstocks for different soils. I think in the beginning, what was quite hard for us starting out on the farm is that there were no specialists to turn on or any almond specific research locally. So the wrong rootstocks were used in the beginning and cultivar choices were quite limited. But now with technology and the internet, there's so much information now that my brother uses that we can basically have 100% yield of the rootstocks that we currently use.
That's astonishing. How much care do the trees need apart from the harvesting? So obviously the harvesting, I imagine, is quite labor intensive. But the rest of the time, I mean, do they need much irrigation? If they like the climate, do they just grow?
So my brother always says an almond tree is a kind tree to have. If you look after the tree will look after you. He has also implemented a couple of there's a lot of technology that we use to see what the tree's needs are, because the almond tree is quite thirsty. But with the new technology that my brother has used, he can see how he can adjust or change the water consumption on the farm. So we use drip irrigation systems too. So that also helps with getting the water straight onto the ground.
And do different cultivars need different types of water? I mean, as always, does the premium product need a little more love and care than the rest of it?
No, it's all about the ground too. I mean, the almond tree, there's no specific amount of water that needs to be done for a specific tree. It's very much all above board for all of them.
So you obviously grew up knowing the farm. you went and did other things. You studied. You were interested in the sports industry. You worked on luxury yachts. I don't know if you're in any miniseries you'd like to tell us about. And then you came back.
That's suicide if you want to do that.
and then you came back to Elman's. Why? I mean, was the family, the lure of the family business? A lot of us can go through a phase of thinking, oh, I should go and do that. Was it that? Was there something about the nuts? I mean, I do get a sense, and I want to talk to you about it a bit later, that the nut industry may be growing. But what was it that brought you back?
I think growing up on the farm gave me and my family a deep love for our story. There's a lot of emotional. We very much emotional linked to the land too. I think because my grandfather's planted these almond trees in fertile soil, so there was nothing when he there was no almond industry when he started. So I think my turning point was realizing I had something unique to contribute. I saw the need for better storytelling and direct marketing, and that's when I committed fully to the business. I wanted to educate consumers on different varieties of almonds. There's different uses different uses for different almonds. The premium one people need to snack on. There's a second grade where you must bake and roast stuff. And consumers in South Africa aren't educated on that. So I think for me it was just important that I could use our story to actually tell people we've got locally grown almonds that's fresher and tastier than any other almond in the world.
Now, almonds don't always sell themselves. It helps if they're, I don't know, coated in chocolate or something, doesn't it?
Yeah, no one really gets excited about a raw almond unless there's something naughty to it. But that was the idea behind the Almond Girl too, to use a high quality product and add adding value to that too. America are the almond kings of the world, and the range and the uses of almonds they have there, it's incredible. And my vision for my brand is to also add quality ingredients to good almonds. But also with our almonds too, with the different varieties compared to the imported almonds, the second grade and the first grade, there are differences between the taste of that too. So people also get excited when they taste our premium almond compared to an almond they find in the shops.
Okay, so the coating stuff, I mean, there must be a lot of opportunity there. Coated in different things, different flavors, different members of the same family will buy, different packets of the same stuff coated in different things. I mean, suddenly, I'm sure there's a big word for it that someone who's sold, I don't know, a lot of washing powder will know. But there's a lot of things that you can suddenly do with it.
Yeah, I get excited when I see a different type of, or when you have a chocolate coated almonds, but you see, oh no, they actually coated it in maple syrup before they coated it with the chocolate. An almond is such a versatile product that you can use. It doesn't just stop with coating. Think about a date ball. Instead of calling it a date ball, call it an almond ball. Put so much almonds in and coated with chocolate, and then you've got a high protein snack right there for you. So I think it's such a good product to work with. The options are quite endless if you think about what you can actually do with it.
One of the most important things must be that, and the fact that you don't have to rush them to the market. I mean, I presume you can store them for quite some time, and that means you can do so much more.
Yeah, so with our operation, we can also see what the market does. So an almond is traded as a commodity. So if we see prices are, not doing well, or prices are skyrocketing, we can decide how and when we want to sell almonds, and we can also keep back stock to get the possible price for what's going on in the market. Almonds can also be stored up until 2 years, between 0 and 10 degrees. So it's a product that you can at least at least a year. You got a buffer if something were to happen. But obviously you want to get your freshest almonds out, because then obviously your quality is also at the best then.
Do you keep some back, not just for market reasons, but in case the next harvest is not good? I mean, do you have some harvests being better than others for whatever reason?
Look, farming is always a gamble, with frost and climate issues. It's definitely something we need to factor in. But no, we very much, we can supply throughout the year, and we can also, we have still buffer stock until the next harvest comes in. So, we would like to get fresh quality almonds out as soon as possible, because by the time our harvest comes, we've got fresher almonds that's ready to be sold, on the market.
And the market itself, I mean, generally speaking, there's obviously a big health conscious market now. I'd imagine almonds fit quite nicely into that.
Yeah, I can see. So since I started the Almond Girl, it's still very much a personal affair to me. I answer every query or question that comes my way. And I can see people who are health conscious, they want to know where the almonds come from. They want to know what you spray. They want to know how you pack it, how the process works. And what's important for us as a family, and also to me, is like most brands shop around for different the price. They're very price sensitive, and so they won't always stay true to the brand that they are getting the almonds from our farm. And from the Almond Girl would always be a single origin almond. It will just come from the farm, and I think that's what's quite important for consumers too. They want to know your brand. It needs to be trusted. A brand is a promise kept, and that's the promise we want to make people aware of that too. It's very much, it's from our family to the table, and I think that's quite important. People want to feel that the producer is also looking after their consumer.
Do you get a sense that the market is sort of growing? I mean, is there a bit more interest than there used to be? I mean, you made the point about direct sales, actual marketing the stuff. I mean, marketing matters. I mean, people have invented what look like orange juices but aren't in the past just because the marketing was so good. An almond is, I would presume, it is a completely natural product, but also, has various advantages in terms of storage, in terms of health. I mean, in some ways, it's kind of a natural and relatively easy thing to sell.
Yeah, I think, well, if we think about how the almond industry in agriculture has grown, that has definitely grown since the past 6-7 years, since my brother joined the family business. But the almonds, and South Africa is also a net importer of almonds. So most of the almonds you get in the country is imported. But we are at a stage where South Africa doesn't have to import almonds at the moment, because within our group we will have enough to supply all the consumers in the country. But so that's quite an exciting thing for us, because it shows you people want to support local. And it's very exciting for us, because it just makes our dream that we have much more of a reality, because it's quite a lonely journey when you start farming with almonds and no one has an idea what they're doing in the beginning.
No, sure. We're speaking to Rennie Leroux, the founder of the Almond Girl. We're talking about the family farm and the little crew. We're talking about the business of growing and selling almonds on How I Make My Money. It's 10 minutes state.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa CIB. Absa is a registered FSP.
The Money Show. How I Make My Money.
We're speaking to Rennie Leroux, founder of the Almond Girl, on The Money Show tonight. Someone who is part of the almond industry and, of course, comes from a family that's played a big part in creating this industry in South Africa. Rennie, you said that all of your competition is from overseas. In other words, other countries growing almonds, selling them here. Are you able to return the favor? I mean, are you looking at any export markets, or are you finding that us South Africans are eating all of your almonds?
No, we are exporting. We've got a couple of markets that we have tapped into, and they are very keen on South African almonds. They love our quality. So we can definitely we don't have to sit back and look at all the other giants in the world. We follow international standards and packing standards. And it's my brother does all the international sales, and I do the food safety. So we work hand in hand with each other just to ensure that we want the best to be out there on the market, and we're very excited that people have discovered us.
Do you? I mean, we were talking about coated almonds a little earlier. I mean, is there more of a taste for that in some markets than in others? I mean, is an almond, or not necessarily? Do you have to make some changes or keep the premium ones for the international market, or do you just send them straight to Cape Town?
Because I've got an abundance of almonds and I can choose how I want to use my almonds, I use a premium in my coated almonds, just because the premium almond is a sweeter in taste. It's a nicer tasting almond. But if someone who had to buy almonds and they have to coat their own almonds, they would use a second grade almond. But it's not necessarily inferior to the product. I mean, we send most of our second grade almonds for almond butter or almond milk, or nougat. So the second grade gets used more for a further processing almond. But you ultimately want the premium grade to be in a snack pack, because it's also a nicer looking nut.
The almond milk market must just be huge, because it really seems to be growing very quickly. Wherever I go, I see it.
Yeah, so we're very proud to say that we supply one of the big brands in South Africa. We've come a long way with them too, and it's amazing to see how they've also grown. And I often ask people, where do they buy their milks from? And then it's always great to hear that, then I can be like, well, that's straight from our farm. And it's also that shows you the quality that we provide them, shows in the quality of milk that also gets produced.
And I mean, could that market grow so much for almond milk that actually it overtakes everything else when it comes to almonds? I mean, as I say, I see it in every coffee shop nowadays.
I think the demand is definitely is definitely increased. I, for one, still love the good old faithful cow's milk, but I think people also use that for their smoothies. It's not just in a coffee. So I think the demand, we foresee that demand will definitely, there's definitely going to be an increase. I think, and I think with butters, there would also be, there's always a market for that. But I think the whole milk, tree nut milk industry, there will definitely be a big shift in that.
And Rennie, we've been talking about a product that doesn't agree with everybody, and in fact, you are one of them. Almonds, and not everybody can eat a large amount of nuts in one sitting.
I'm mildly allergic. It's not. It's. I just get very uncomfortable. So for me, it's I just need to be very conscious of how many I eat, and that especially when it comes to the savory and the chocolate coated. But I do need to. There's always a quality control that has to happen. But I have a good team behind me. My family, they also, and my QC department to see what the taste is like. But it's tree nut allergies. But still, almonds are still one of the most consumed tree nuts in the world. So I don't think we'll be sitting with a big problem.
No,
with that too.
sure. I'm just teasing you, and for no other reason than that I can. So you're in your third generation this farm now. Any prospects of a fourth generation? I mean, people love, I don't know why, but people love the story of generational farms. And I mean, so many of them are in South Africa, of course.
Yeah, well, there's always that curse that says after the third generation, the business falls apart. So we're going to try hard that doesn't happen. But I think my hope is to still keep growing sustainability and staying true to the legacy that my grandfather started and having that spill over to the fourth generation. I think I want to create something strong enough to pass on to the next generation, something that they can be proud of, whether they choose to farm or contribute in their own way. I've got a nephew, so we are like, sometimes it can be a curse, or it could be something beautiful to have a farm given to someone. But I think the story will also inspire him one day to take it further. I think it's a very special thing to carry too. So,
Sure.
And it's very much a family affair here with us. And I foresee in the next 20 years, it will still be a family affair. We're a very close family. So it won't all just fall on the fourth generation. That generation is still very much intertwined with all of us.
Thank you. Really enjoyed the story. Really enjoyed your insights. Founder of the Almond Girl.
The Money Show, Stephen Grootes, is brought to you by Absa CIB. Absa is a registered FSP.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Rennie LaRue as much as I did. Not very often we get into the nut business. In the US, still very sort of flat, kind of meh. The Dow Jones is down 0.05. The Nasdaq is up 0.13. The S&P 500 is up 0.04. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Good evening. It's 8 o'clock.